Steve Brusatте, thanks so much for coming on to Evolutionoup, all the way from your office in Edinburgh. You are a vertebrate paleontologist and evolutionary biologist at University of Edinburgh, Scotland, specializing in the anatomy, genealogy, and evolution of dinosaurs and other fossil organisms. As well as describing over 15 new species of fossil animals, you are also the scientific consultant for the BBC's Walking with Dinosaurs team, and most recently, the paleontology advisor for Jurassic World Dominion. Today we'll be talking about all those things, as well as your newest book, The Rise and Reign of the Mammals. But before we do, let's just hear a little bit about who you are and what you do.
I'm Steve Brusatте. I am one of those lucky people that gets to dig up dinosaurs and mammals and other fossils for my job. So I'm a paleontologist. I'm a professor at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. I think you can tell by the way I'm talking. I didn't grow up here. I grew up in the middle part of America. I grew up near Chicago, but I've been living here about a decade. And I run a lab here at the university. I teach here, and I write books. So I have a new book out called The Rise and Reign of the Mammals. It's all about our deep evolutionary story. And it's a follow-up of sorts to a book I did a few years ago called The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs. And really these two books together, they come from the trajectory of my career. I really started out as a dinosaur researcher. My PhD was in dinosaurs. But the more I've studied dinosaurs, the more I've become enthralled with what's happened after the dinosaurs, after that asteroid hit. T-Rex is gone. Triceratops is gone. Then what happened? Well, then what happened is that mammals took over. And it's really from that wave of mammal diversification to replace the dinosaurs that we ultimately emerged.
Steve, did you always have an interest in science, and in particular, paleontology?
I grew up in a small town called Ottawa in Illinois, just like the Canadian capital, but much, much smaller. It's a town that's about 75 miles or so from Chicago, but out past the suburbs, right in the middle of corn and soybean country. And it is flat in every direction you look. It is flat infinitely, it seems like. And nobody's ever found a dinosaur bone in Illinois, but there are other fossils there. And when I was a teenager, that's when I really became interested in fossils. And in large part, it was because my youngest brother, Chris, was a dinosaur fanatic. He loved dinosaurs. He loved Jurassic Park. He turned his bedroom into a dinosaur museum. So living with him, just over time through osmosis, I became into dinosaurs too. But then when I went to high school, I learned more about actual paleontology, about real fossils. I learned from some of my classes, some of my teachers, that you could find fossils in Illinois. No, not dinosaurs, but you could find the bones of woolly mammoths and saber-toothed tigers. You could find things that are even older than dinosaurs. You can find corals and clams and ferns and other fossils that lived more than 280 million years ago. So I started to collect these fossils when I was a teenager. I would go out sometimes with one of my teachers, Mr. Jacobchek, who's become a dear family friend of ours over time. I'd go out with my rock hammer, with a little guidebook, and I'd go out and look for fossils. And that's what got me into paleontology. And I think it's such a neat thing that paleontology is such an accessible science. You don't need to have a PhD behind your name or be a professor or be at a university to study fossils, to find fossils. Anybody can collect fossils. And that is just so different from most other sciences. It's very hard to be an amateur nuclear physicist, let's say. But when it comes to paleontology, even a high school kid like me could go out and find fossils. And that led me into this eventual career path.
This month, June 2022, saw the release of the third Jurassic World movie, Jurassic World Dominion. Steve, I'm guessing that this must have been a dream come true for you. So can you tell us how you got this role as paleontology advisor for the film?
One of the most interesting and amazing and really surreal things I've ever done is help out with the Jurassic World Dominion film, a new film that's come out in the summer of 2022. And I was the paleontology consultant on the film. So it was my job to be on a call for the director, for the writers, for the artists, anytime they had questions about dinosaurs. And so I saw it as my duty to make sure that the real science, the real fossils, what we really know about dinosaurs, that information was always in the ears of the Hollywood geniuses making the movie magic. And it was really a privilege to do it, to have this opportunity to bring the research that we do as scientists to a huge global audience. I mean, I think there's probably fewer, better ways to reach lots and lots and lots of people all over the world than a blockbuster movie. And so we're very fortunate as paleontologists that Jurassic Park and Jurassic World, these movies, they are huge films and they teach so many people about dinosaurs. So I love doing the job. It came about kind of randomly. In 2018, I wrote the book, The Rise and Fall of the Dinosaurs, which was a pop science book about the evolutionary history of dinosaurs and what we know about dinosaurs and how we study dinosaurs. And a few months after the book came out, I got an email one day from a guy purporting to be Colin Trevorrow. It's a name I recognized immediately. He's the director of the Jurassic World series. And so he said, "Hey, I read your book. I'm going to be coming up to Edinburgh. You want to meet up? You want to talk dinosaurs?" And one thing led to another, and we did meet up. I thought it was a hoax, by the way. I thought it was, somebody just having a go at me. One of my students maybe playing a trick on me, sending this fake email, but it turned out to be real, and it led to this job consulting on a Hollywood film, which was a lot of fun. So you have, all the big name stars. You got lots of dinosaurs. It very much is an action blockbuster type of film, but it's fun. And what I was particularly pleased about was that there were so many new dinosaurs in this film, and there were dinosaurs with feathers for the first time properly in a Jurassic Park film. There were dinosaurs with feathers, and we know that so many dinosaurs had feathers. Some dinosaurs even had wings, but that hasn't been shown in Jurassic Park because just by bad luck, the first fossils of dinosaur skeletons covered in feathers were discovered in 1996. The first Jurassic Park came out in 1993. So back when Steven Spielberg made Jurassic Park, he didn't know there were feathers on dinosaurs. And the success of that film kind of set in stone the image of a Jurassic Park dinosaur. And so it's taken till now for there to be an opportunity to show what some of these dinosaurs really looked like. And yes, they did have feathers. Yes, they did have wings. You're going to see that in this Jurassic World film, and that's what I'm most proud of.
You've written books about dinosaurs before, but now you've just released The Rise and Reign of the Mammals from HarperCollins. So what can people expect when they dive into its pages?
I'm very excited about the new book I have out. It's called The Rise and Reign of the Mammals, and it's a pop science book meant for just a general audience, general readership. It's not an academic book. It's not a technical book. What the book does is tell the story of mammal evolution, and it tells a 325 million year evolutionary journey. It goes all the way back in time to the coal swamps, 325 million years ago, when the Earth was so different from today. And it was then in that world, a world where there were dragonflies the size of pigeons and millipedes that were bigger than humans, a world where these huge swamps filled the tropics and the subtropics. Those are the swamps where trees were buried, forming a lot of the coal that we mine today. It was a hot, humid world, and it was in that world that the mammal line broke off from the great family tree of life. It split off from the reptile group, and it was then that mammals began their evolutionary march. And it was just one thing that really set these first proto-mammals apart. They had a big opening behind their eye socket that held huge jaw muscles so they could bite a lot harder than other animals at the time. And it was that one humble little change that inaugurated this group that would eventually survive asteroids and volcanoes and global warming and ice ages and changing sea levels and drifting continents to produce the 6,000 mammal species that live today, everything from bats and whales to dogs and cats and elephants, and ultimately, of course, us. So in the book, I tell this story. It's a breezy story, 10 chapters, 325 million years. And I try to give a little bit of insight into what it's like to be a scientist, what it's like to discover mammal fossils, how we find fossils, how we study these fossils, how we know what we know. And I hope this book gives us a deeper perspective on our own heritage, because we are a sublime species. We have evolved huge brains and high intelligence and the ability to work in groups and the ability to affect the earth in good and in bad, more than any other animal ever. But we are but one species on this great mammal family tree. And this is our story that I tell in the book.
Recently on this channel, we spoke to Julien Benoit about synapsids, the reptile-like precursors to mammals. Steve, you cover the synapsids in the Rise and Reign of the Mammals.
In the Rise and Reign of the Mammals, I try to tell that whole story 325 million years, going back to that time that the mammal group split off from the reptiles on the family tree of life. True mammals didn't emerge until about 225 million years ago. So there was about 100 million years of evolution where there weren't actual proper mammals. But the ancestors of mammals were living, were changing, they were evolving, they were adapting, they were diversifying, and they were developing those features one by one that later would come together to define the mammal blueprint. So things like hair and feeding babies milk and big brains and high intelligence and keen senses of smell and hearing and all these different teeth we have. We have canines and incisors and premolars and molars, all these different teeth that do different things, that can bite together firmly, that can chew our food. That's something that most other animals just simply don't have. So all of those things are what make mammals mammals. Those things evolved one by one in these synapsid ancestors, these proto-mammals. And these synapsids, they lived during the Carboniferous and the Permian periods of Earth history. And these were times that were so different from today. All the land was coming together, and it formed a supercontinent, Pangaea. It stretched from North Pole to South Pole. It started out hot and humid, then it turned hot and dry over much of that continent. And you had these synapsids diversifying, adapting in order to live in that world. And during the Permian period, from roughly about 300 to about 250 million years ago, you had all kinds of synapsids that were dominant. They were the top meat eaters, the top plant eaters, the biggest animals, the most diverse animals in a lot of ecosystems on land. And there were ones with sails on their back, like Dimetrodon, that classic iconic animal. It's often mistaken as a dinosaur. You see it a lot of times in the dinosaur toy sets and on the dinosaur posters, but it's not a dinosaur. It's an early relative, a distant antecedent of ours. And then you had others with saber teeth. You had these things called Gorgonopsians. They were the top predators later in the Permian. They had big sabers for teeth. They were the biggest, baddest, meanest meat eaters at that point in Earth history. And you had plant eaters. You had animals with big pot bellies that guzzled plants all day. The first truly giant leaf eaters in Earth history. All of these animals were synapsids. They were all early cousins of ours. They were all proliferating. They were all taking over, dominating that Permian world. And then there was this horrible mass extinction about 250 million years ago. These enormous volcanoes erupted in Siberia. And these were essentially fissures, cracks, canyons in the earth that just opened up and spewed out lava for hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of years. And that lava covered a huge amount of land. But the lava wasn't really even the problem. It was all the carbon dioxide, the methane, the greenhouse gases that came up as that lava burned through the crust. And that led to runaway global warming. That led to a mass extinction. Maybe up to 95% of species died. Many of those synapsids could not cope. And just when it looked like these mammal antecedents were about to become truly ascendant, they were stopped in their tracks. And then in the next interval of time, the Triassic period, this is when dinosaurs came onto the scene. Dinosaurs became the dominant animal. But there was one type of synapsid that did eke on through that terrible extinction. And these things were called cynodonts. And there were a few other groups that also made it through, just a few, but cynodonts were the really important one because they were small, they could hide easily, they grew fast, they reproduced fast, they were smart, and they got through that extinction. And on the other side, in this largely empty world, it was those cynodonts that became true mammals. And those first true mammals rose up alongside the dinosaurs And of course, the mammals and the dinosaurs, they had different fates. The dinosaurs were destined for grandeur. Some of them became larger than Boeing 737 airplanes. Others turned into birds. Others became the largest predators to ever live on land, like T-Rex. The mammals had to stay in the shadows. Mammals and dinosaurs lived with each other for the next 150 million years or so, and there was never a mammal living with the dinosaurs that was bigger than a badger, because they just couldn't get big in a world that was controlled by T-Rexes and Brontosauruses. But conversely, we need to recognize that the opposite is also true. Yes, dinosaurs kept the mammals small, but mammals kept the dinosaurs big. Mammals were so good at living incognito, living underground, living in the undergrowth. They were so well adapted to those small niches, to living in burrows, to living at night. They were largely anonymous, but they were so good at it. There became mammals that could scurry, that could climb, that could swim, that could dig, that could glide on wings of skin. These mammals were so good at being small that they kept the dinosaurs big. You never saw a dinosaur the size of one of these little mammals. You never saw a T-Rex the size of a mouse. You never saw a Brontosaurus the size of a rat, because the mammals were in those ecological niches and they kept the dinosaurs out of those niches. And that's how things stayed until that one drastic, dramatic moment 66 million years ago, when the 6-mile wide asteroid fell out of the sky, unleashed chaos and bedlam, tsunamis, earthquakes, wildfires, so many things. And it reshaped the environment. It reshaped the entire Earth in a matter of minutes, hours, days, weeks. This was really the single most devastating moment in Earth history. And the dinosaurs could not cope with that. They all died out except for some birds. Some mammals made it through. We had ancestors that stared down that asteroid, and they got through because they were small, because they could hide, because they could grow fast and reproduce fast, because they were flexible, they were adaptable, they could eat lots of different foods. All of those things they learned, those survival tricks for living in the shadow of the dinosaurs, came in handy when that asteroid hit. And now on the other side of the asteroid, now all of a sudden, no T-Rex anymore, no Triceratopses anymore. The world was largely empty. Those surviving mammals, they responded by diversifying, by evolving, by coming into new species, and they especially got bigger. And within 100, 200, 300,000 years of the asteroid impact, you had mammals the size of pigs. Within 1 or 2 million years, you had mammals the size of cows, and they would continue to get bigger until eventually you got things like elephants and giant rhinos, and eventually even things like blue whales, the largest animals that have ever lived in the entire history of the Earth, which are alive right now.
Steve, if you could get yourself a time machine and go back in time to spy on the megafauna mammals of the ancient world, what animal would you absolutely love to see the most?
I do love the megafauna. And the megafauna really fascinates me because these mammals, these mostly giant mammals, they lived so recently. Most of them went extinct only about 10,000 years ago. Our ancestors, our Homo sapiens ancestors would have known these mammals, would have seen these mammals, encountered these mammals. They would have interacted with these mammals. They would have hunted these mammals. They would have drawn these mammals. There are caves in France and Spain that are plastered with paintings of woolly mammoths, really the first human graffiti. And so the megafauna, I love these things. They're fascinating. And we're talking about things like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, saber-toothed tigers, dire wolves, American lions, giant hyenas, beavers the size of humans, armadillos the size of Volkswagens, deer with antlers bigger than a kitchen table. There were sloths that lived on the ground and walked on their knuckles that were over 10 feet tall. In Australia, there were wombats that weighed over 3 tons. There were kangaroos that were too plump to hop. And that's just a small little look at the diversity of this megafauna. These were superb, just spectacular animals. I think some of the most charismatic fossils that have ever lived. And I am particularly fascinated by those giant ground sloths, because today we know sloths, they're cute, they're cuddly, they hang from the branches, they just kind of loiter up there, up in the canopy. But just imagine, a mere 10,000 or so years ago, there were sloths that could dunk a basketball if they wanted to, sloths that could look into a second-story window. Imagine what it would have been like to see an animal like that, to walk alongside it, and know that we had ancestors that actually did that, that did see these animals, that did walk alongside these animals.
Steve, you're where you are now because of a childhood love of dinosaurs and prehistoric creatures. So what would you say to any young people who may be watching this now, who love dinosaurs, who love ancient mammals, and who want to do what you do? What advice would you give to them right now?
There are so many young people, I meet young people all the time that love dinosaurs, that love fossils, that love paleontology, that have a real enthusiasm. And I was like that. I was like that when I was a teenager. I wasn't like that when I was 5 years old, 6 years old, even 10 years old. So whenever I meet kids that age that are obsessed with dinosaurs or other fossils, I tell them, I say, you're way ahead of where I was at that age. And what you have to do is just keep that enthusiasm going. Remain passionate. Remain curious. Keep asking questions. Keep reading books. Keep going to museums if you have the opportunity. Look at dinosaur fossils. Look at mammal fossils. Keep up with the latest news on the internet. It's so easy these days to see what the latest discoveries are. You can follow real scientists on social media. These are great ways to just keep a pulse on the current field of paleontology. And then when it comes time to study in school, you're a bit older, maybe you're in high school or you're in secondary school or university, whatever it may be, and you still want to be a paleontologist, that's wonderful. Now's the time to start taking a lot of science courses. Make sure that you know a lot about all areas of science. Make sure you know some math, but you don't need to be a mathematical genius to be a paleontologist. Most of us have forgotten, most of the calculus that we took and the algebra that we took. It's much more important to have a broad background, to be curious, to know about the earth, to know about anatomy, to know about evolution. Those are the main subjects you need to study. And if you get an opportunity, go out and collect your own fossils. Get a guidebook, get a rock hammer, hit the road, hit the trails, go and see if you can find your own fossils, because there is nothing more exhilarating than going out somewhere, finding a fossil, whether it's a dinosaur bone, a mammoth tooth, whether it's a clamshell, whether it's a piece of petrified wood, whatever it is, finding this thing. You are the first human to ever see this. This thing is millions of years old. It's a clue from a distant world, an ancient world. And here you are, you found it. There is nothing that is more fascinating than that feeling. And that is the best way, at least for me, to keep my enthusiasm going for this wonderful field of paleontology.
Well, your new book is out and your time working on Jurassic World is finished. So what new and future projects can you reveal to us?
I'd love to write another book again at some point. I don't know if I will soon or not. I've done the dinosaur book, I've done the mammal book. We'll see what comes next. But right now, I'm going to have to turn my attention more towards research, because I have a lab here in Edinburgh. I have a great group of colleagues, of postdocs, of students that are all working together on this big research project, and we are trying to understand those mammals that took over from the dinosaurs. These are the ones that really fascinate me. So I studied dinosaurs as a PhD student early in my career. At the university, I mostly studied dinosaurs, but the more I've studied dinosaurs, the more I've become interested in what came next. How did mammals survive that asteroid that killed the dinosaurs? And then how did mammals take advantage of that opportunity to establish all of these amazing, successful groups of mammals that are around today? So we are doing a big project. We're going out. We're looking for fossils of these very first mammals, the ones that survived the asteroid and started to diversify afterwards. We were just out in New Mexico a few weeks ago, one of the best places in the world to find fossils of the very last dinosaurs and the very first mammals that took over from them. And we're building a big family tree. We're trying to understand how these mammals that lived right after the asteroid, how they relate to the mammals that came before and to the mammals that live today. So we're really getting at the origins of primates, of horses, of cattle, of rodents, of all of these successful mammal groups. And we're trying to understand how they survived, how they proliferated afterwards, how quickly they evolved, what their diets were like, how they moved, what their ecosystems were like. So that is a big part of my attention right now as a researcher.
Steve Brusatте, thank you very much indeed.